want you to imagine that you're sitting at home watching television, or your husband's sitting at home, and he sees on the TV that there's a shooter out in your neighborhood. What is your responsibility or your husband's responsibility as the head of the household? To stay at home and protect your family first, or to go out and make sure that other people are kept equally safe? I would argue that, like a government and like a family, the job lies at home. Responsibility lies at home. This is going to be the crux of my argument today as I conclude this last speech. That inherently, a government's obligation is first to its citizens and secondly to the rest of the world. Elliot agreed with me on this point. So we can also then conclude that a nationalist approach, since we are talking about a governmental actor, is inherently correct. And now I'd like to go ahead and just address a few points that were brought up by Elliot in his last speech and show how they really don't have as much weight in the round as you may think. Let's first talk about the idea of global interest, which is in the definition that we talked about. Elliot has mistakenly said that global interest equivocates to morality. That's not true whatsoever. Essentially, just like he says nationalism can lead to violating human rights outside your nation and justifying it, globalism is merely what the majority believes to be true. That's why I brought up the example of slavery. It's not inherently moral, obviously, but it was a global interest at the time. Now, like I said, neither of us are advocating for these points, so the point that he brought up that a national society or a nationalistic type of philosophy has a flaw in it, which is no inherent limit, is wrong. Because we placed a limit on the round at the very beginning when we talked about we're using a moral actor. Otherwise, we can really find no way of determining which is right and wrong. So what are we left with? My few voting issues now. Prioritization. Prioritization is the first voting issue. We're asked which ought to be done first. Now, like I said, the two terms are not mutually exclusive, which means one can happen and then the second can happen. In response to his point about globalization being on the rise, that's an example of nationalism happening first, being valued highest, and then globalism kind of takes the job. Why though? Because the nations have their act put together. When we value globalism first, we get examples like Vietnam, like the example of the shooter that I provided to you, or unfortunately, like the example of if you go on an airplane and you try to save your child, you end up with you both end up dying. That's the fact of the matter, and that's how reality works. As far as I'm concerned, globalism is a good philosophy and can protect human rights, but nationalism does it better for two main reasons. It upholds the role of a moral government, which we talked about, and secondly, nationalism allows you to protect your own rights first so that you can go out and protect the human rights of all people. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking for you.